Hey, welcome back. Left unchecked, organized crime will continue to seriously impair South Africa's reputation and development. This statement from a report by the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime. Since 2010, the murder rate in South Africa has jumped by 38%, while kidnappings have increased fourfold. South Africa also ranks 19th on the global index measuring organized crime. Sobering numbers indeed that paint a very bleak picture. Let's unpack the report further with Julian Rademeyer, who is the director of the Organised Crime Observatory for East and Southern Africa at the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime. Julian, good evening and thank you for your time. So I had a glimpse into the report, didn't read all of it, but it is quite interesting. You tracked 15 categories of, what can be categorized as organized crime, subsectors. And in fact, you used words that we associate with the economy. Has it become some kind of a ecosystem that is interconnected to the extent that while we mention one crime, the rapes of these women in the West Rand the other day, a few weeks ago, and not link it to the shootings at taverns, but actually, if you think about it, it's all interconnected.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Thulasizwe, for having me on. I think the point of this report was that we wanted to take a step back and look at organized crime in South Africa and look at where we are. As far as I'm aware, this is the first assessment of its kind done in more than a decade. And what we want to do is shine a spotlight on the markets that we feel are the greatest threat to our democracy, to our society, and to our political system. And I think that the 15 markets that we identified that are the focus of this particular report are markets that have to be dealt with, and they have to be dealt with urgently. I think that we're seeing, and we have seen over a period of times for a number of reasons, including the erosion of abilities within the police, within our prosecutorial authority, the crippling of police crime intelligence, the attacks that have occurred on infrastructure in this country. We've seen a gradual, steady erosion which has led to organized crime seeping into almost every aspect of our society. I think the chilling part of all of this, and certainly from the research that we've been looking at, is that we've identified 15 markets. 10 of those markets, in our view, are increasing in scope and scale. So everything from economic and financial crime to cybercrime, organized robbery, organized violence, which includes targeted hits on people. We've seen KwaZulu-Natal. Very recently, a senior Induna was assassinated, political hits there, kidnapping for ransom, extortion, illegal mining, obviously with the Krugersdorp incident, and violence associated with mass public transport, the burning of buses, attacks and assassinations in the taxi industry. We also have environmental crimes, which pose other threats to our society. So it's a very grave challenge. And in our view, this is an existential threat to our society and something that needs to be addressed very urgently and prioritized by the state.
Yeah, in fact, I found that use of that phrase, existential threat, quite chilling, Julian, because, the implications for all of us who live in this republic are quite dire.
Yeah.
What are some of the factors that you've identified as being core to the wide range of these categories that are increasing, as well as the ones that you identify as being stable at a high rate? So they are stable, but at a really high rate.
I think the really worrying element for us is the sharp increase in the involvement of what we term mafia-style actors or mafia-like actors. So the entrenchment of gangs, we've seen that in the Western Cape in a big way, but there's a spreading void that's been left by the state or left by police, which is being filled by alternative criminal economies and alternative criminal actors. So we see a sharp increase, certainly from our last index in 2019 up to 2021, mafia-style actors. I think, the other challenges that we face is that, and I think it's important to point out that South Africa is in quite a unique position because it's a country with very high levels of organized crime, but it's also a country with comparatively high levels of resilience. We have laws in place. We have efforts to look into money laundering. We have some investigative capacity. We have, financial institutions and others who have investigative capacity. We have our courts, which have served us well, both in trying to deal with the state capture issues, but also generally ticking over. But the problem is that resilience is beginning to erode, and that's why we see this as quite a dangerous tipping point. I think that we have to look at this strategically. We have to look at how do we tackle this in the long term. This is going to be unglamorous work. It's going to be long. It's going to be difficult. It's going to require focus from the state. It's going to require a relook at how we deal with organized crime more broadly. And it's going to require the state to prioritize organized crime, and look at the harms that organized crime causes. Simple crimes like copper theft, for instance. Something like that on its own may not be a big issue, but in a totality, the amount of copper that's being stolen, the impact it has on millions of people, the impact it has on our economy.
Sure. So, Julian, in fact, in the report, you make the point that while the situation is dire, now is not the time to engage in fatalistic thinking, and you use the words vast array of tools that can be used to push back against organized crime. I don't know. In my mind, I have these examples of targeted investigations that were used against the mafia and crime families in the United States, in various cities, but also in Italy, various approaches that center prosecution. As we have this conversation around corruption, about fusion centers and collaboration and prosecutor-led investigations, is that the direction you are thinking when you say vast array of tools that can be used?
I think very much so. I think there are many things that we can do. It does require political will. It does require focus. I think that, in our view, a lot of the responses to date have been very stovepiped, very reactive. So, for instance, the Krugersdorp gang rape incident, something that awful had to happen before we had the crackdown that we had. And, illegal mining and criminality in Krugersdorp had been growing for a very long time, more than a decade. So I think that, our approaches have not been strategic or future-oriented. I think there's a lack of strategy. I think there's a lot of siloing that goes on within government departments that are charged with these responsibilities. So a lot of that needs to be overcome. I think that we need society to embrace this challenge. I think civil society needs to be involved. I think we need a whole of government approach, for want of a better description. Because this is not something we can arrest our way out of. We can't jail hundreds and thousands of people. We need targeted investigations. We need other interventions. We need to explore the options, for instance, with illegal mining. Can we bring people into the formal economy? How do we address that? So, that sort of hardened law enforcement approach, the approach that we've seen, where very often it's the cannon fodder, the foot soldiers in organized crime being arrested. We need to look far beyond that, and we have to have a clear, very focused strategy.
Yeah, and I suppose all of government approach really is the apt description of what might start to lead us in some direction towards solutions. I've got to thank you for your time, Julian. Good to see you after a while. Julian Rademeyer there talking to us about this report that has come out. You should read it. It's on globalinitiative.net. You really need to read it so that you can, as they say, connect the dots, so that you see that some of the crimes we think are isolated, they actually form part of a bigger ecosystem that, according to this report, forms now an existential threat to the Republic.